This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
Studies show there is a growing need for mental health services for children and youth. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 1 in 5 children and adolescents experience a mental health problem during their school years. Things like stress, anxiety, bullying, family problems, depression, a learning disability, and alcohol and substance abuse. That same study shows that more support is needed for families and married couples as well. Well, today's experts will help us navigate the mental health system and all the services that are available. Joining me now is Lorelei Lindow, licensed professional counselor, and Jennifer Moynihan Wynn, marriage and family therapist. Welcome to Tar Heel Talk.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Now, as I mentioned, studies are showing that there is a growing need for mental health services. Talk a little bit about that need and what you're seeing within your own practices.
Yeah, so one of my histories is also as a school counselor, and so I am informed somewhat from that experience as well. But I would say more and more I'm just noticing a lot more stress, which can lead to anxiety, and just a lot of pressures that kids are feeling, whether it's internal pressures or the actual external pressures of just keeping up with everything.
Right. And in terms of families and couples, there are stressors there as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a stressful time that we're living in, and then if we kind of pair it with the stress that our kids are facing, family stress can be a really hard time. And I think just having access to media all of the time is also such a stressful thing, and it's really hard for people to disconnect from it.
Right. Especially with your mobile devices and smartphones having the news at your fingertips constantly.
Right.
Both good and bad can be.
Right. It can feel like doom and gloom really easily and fast.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, it's important when you're looking for a professional to help with counseling or therapy that you understand who you're looking for, because there are so many options. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between your psychologist, your psychiatrist, your therapist and counselor. Kind of help us navigate, where to even begin to find the right professional.
It's a great question, and I get that all of the time. People are not sure where to start, whether they're looking for themselves, whether they're looking for a family. They just don't even know where to begin, and they have some real common misconceptions that medication is always going to be a part of it, and while at times that is going to be important to evaluate, counseling is very different than that. And so I think the important things to differentiate are psychiatrists are medical doctors, MDs, and they could be a physician assistant or a family nurse practitioner, but those are the professionals who would be able to prescribe medication if needed. And then you start looking at psychologists. Those tend to be those who are in research. They can be clinical counselors who provide counseling services, but not always.
Okay.
But that is the level that you might need for a psych ed report. You mentioned sometimes really needing to explore whether there's a learning difference or something else that might be impeding someone's academic or social success, and that might be the route to go if you need that evaluated.
Okay, that's a psychological educational evaluation.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, and a lot of times they'll do testing, sometimes for personality, or if you need a mental health diagnosis that's a little bit more specific, they may do things like that. And then there's master's level counselors, which Lorelei and myself are. And there's lots of different acronyms that you may see, like LPC, LMFT, LCSW, and all of us pretty much do mostly the same job. We've just been trained a little bit differently. I know I can only speak for myself. As an LMFT, I've been specifically trained on how to work with couples and families in a relational context. So even if I'm working with an individual, I will often imagine what other people are in their life and how do they interact with those people, how are they impacted by the different systems or the different people in their life, and how are those impacting their current mental health. So that's how my training has been a little bit different than potentially some others. But we pretty much all do the basic same type of counseling, just working with people and trying to help them meet their goals.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the questions that a person should ask when they're trying to find the right counselor?
That's a great question too. So I think one is really to first check in with yourself about what am I looking for? What kind of expertise is going to be needed? Or is it just simply, I don't know how to get started?
Right.
And so just being able to explore, there are some websites that are helpful to start navigating some of it. I'm on Psychology Today, and it seems to be a fairly common one that a lot of therapists are on. I think sometimes starting with a pediatrician or your primary care physician, I actually get quite a few referrals that way, because they can also help differentiate, is something a medical issue, or if they start really exploring what's going on with that person, they might notice that there are something maybe in a mental health avenue that maybe should be explored. So one of the questions would be, what is that person's training? Making sure they're a licensed therapist.
Right. Okay.
And fortunately, North Carolina does require that. There are some states that don't. And I think it's just so important, because we have to keep up with our professionalism. We have a code of ethics, and it's just critical to know that you have someone who has that expertise.
How can people find out more information about your individual practices and the work and the services that you provide to youth and families?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, Psychology Today is one of them. I do have a website, lindaucounseling.com, or they can certainly just give me a call as well.
Okay, and that number is 919-448-1707. Jennifer, how can people reach you?
I have a website, which is findingbalancennc.com. I also have a social media presence on Instagram mostly, that they can kind of get a sense for who I am and kind of what I value and what kind of people may be a good fit in part of my practice. Because that's really, I would say, the most important part of finding a counselor that's right for you is making sure that it feels like a good fit. Because if the person has a lot of training, that's wonderful and absolutely needed. But if you can't really trust them and don't really jive with them, then it's really not going to be a benefit to you. So absolutely interviewing people and going to their websites and seeing just if they jive with you is a really good first start. And I have lots of web presence where you can kind of get a sense of who I am. From my website, I am also on Psychology Today and a couple other things out there from like the Gottman Institute and things like that.
Definitely some good advice. We're going to take a break. We'll talk more in just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Up next, the challenges to getting counseling. We'll tell you how to address them when Tar Heel Talk continues. Today's show focuses on the growing need for counseling and mental health services for youth, couple, and families. With us again is Lorelei Lindau, licensed professional counselor, and Jennifer Moynihan-Wynn, marriage and family therapist. Now, before the break, you were talking about how important it is to find the right professional to help you with your counseling, therapy, mental health needs. A lot of times, though, people are even hesitant to make that first step in even getting help. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that people face with even trying to get mental health services.
Sure. There's been a stigma. It's disappointing that people aren't able to view it the same way they see physical health. It's really just a part of us. It's a part of our being, and in many ways equally important to have real good mental health.
Absolutely.
So that we can have a fulfilled life and great interpersonal experiences. And a lot of times when that area of our lives is out of sync, then it's going to feed into all other areas of our life and career and family and relationships, friendships. So I think one thing I always have tried to do, including when I worked in the schools, is just break down that stigma, that it's just talking to someone, venting to someone, you know, just being able to get some direction and self-exploration that would be helpful. So I think one of the biggest barriers is just breaking down that stigma of making the call, and realizing that we all have a mental health to keep healthy, and if it's out of sync a little bit, that it's okay to reach out to a professional for some help.
I definitely see that in my experience. I work with a lot of couples, and a lot of times couples have the idea that if they're coming to seek services or coming to seek help from somebody, that maybe their marriage is completely ruined or on the road to divorce, or that they need to wait before they actually go see a professional, and which is really unfortunate that the studies have shown that most couples wait an average of 7 years before trying, I know, right? Before trying to seek any kind of help, where if they are able to do it a little bit earlier, there's so much more that can be done, because oftentimes by the time 7 years comes around, lots of kind of damage and underlying patterns and habits and really bad things can kind of come apart, where, you know, if we just being able to say, like, your marriage doesn't have to be on the brink in order for you to benefit from getting services. And just the same way that, like, you don't have to be suffering to have any kind of help for your mental health, whether it's in your relationship or just individually. Being able to approach it as early as possible is such a better strategy to really set yourself up for success.
I know that cost can be another barrier for a lot of people. I know with insurance, so not all practices will accept insurance, and that can be a factor for some people. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in that and how you help your clients navigate that system.
Yeah, so I am paneled with Blue Cross Blue Shield. That was a decision I made for my practice, but there are clinicians who have very intentionally decided not to accept insurance, and that can be for a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, sometimes the reimbursement rates are not wonderful, and so a lot of clinicians just feel like it's not a viable option for them. I really appreciate being able to have it, because I do have now more of a breadth of diversity within my practice. More people can seek me out who maybe couldn't afford me in another way, and I have also been able to try to provide a sliding scale that doesn't always slide quite as low as what might be feasible for some people. I really encourage people to find out about their insurance benefits, both in and out of network. Almost all medical plans do have some level of coverage for outpatient counseling sessions, but that's not always discussed in your HR meeting and what your coverage includes. And so I think educating yourself, making the phone call, finding out about your benefits, and trying to find someone in network who does jive with you, that you feel like that connection and that personality will be a good match for you.
And I think it's important, you know, you have some ability. There's like a number on the back of your insurance card, and if you call them, they'll have a lot of information for you about, like, do you have a deductible? Can you expect to pay a copay? Just so that you can educate yourself and empower yourself to be able to understand kind of what your coverages are. I think another thing to consider, though, is, you know, especially for couples therapy, insurance doesn't always cover that. So it's being able to know what is actually covered under my plan. And perhaps if it's not covered, you know, maybe being able to work something out so that you come to do sessions every other week, or where do you need to make your mental health a priority in your life so that you can make it happen for you. It can be a tough thing, but there may be resources out there, especially if you're able to advocate for yourself.
And I do get some calls where I'm not able to match their needs, partially because of a financial component. I'm not accepting their insurance. They really would like to find someone in their network, or they don't have insurance at all and really can't afford it. So I find that one of my roles sometimes is just helping people connect to the right resources. And so don't be afraid to call, and hopefully that person on the other end would also be able to help you find what you need, even if it's not that particular clinician.
Absolutely. I see that as part of my job. Even if I can't help the person who calls me, I really try to find someone else who can, whether they need someone in their network or they don't have insurance and they need to find a sliding scale fee. I do find it as part of my job to try to connect them with services. So I help people with that all the time, even if they never step into my office.
And Raleigh actually has some great resources for those who maybe are limited in their finances. And so that would, don't hesitate to use that number and reach out to either me or to Jennifer for those resources if needed.
Right. I think that's really important to have a resource bank, if you will, to help people who have a lot of different needs and financial constraints. But let's tell people how they can reach you if they have any questions about the work that you do.
Absolutely. So they can come to my website, which is www.lindaucounseling.com, or my phone number 919-448-1707.
Okay. And you, Jennifer?
My website is www.findingbalancennc.com, and my phone number is 919-926-8057.
Okay. We're going to take another break. We'll talk more in just a minute.
Great. Thank you.
We'll be back with more on mental health services after these messages. Welcome back to Tar Heel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. Today's show focuses on the growing need for counseling and mental health services for youth, couples, and families. With us again is Lorelei Lindau, licensed professional counselor, and Jennifer Moynihan Wynn, marriage and family therapist. Thank you both again for being with us.
Absolutely. It's been great.
You've given us a lot of great information about seeking out the right counselor or therapist, the questions you should ask, some of the challenges that you might face in with health insurance and how to navigate around those. Let's get a better understanding of some of the things that you see in your private practice and a little bit more about what you do as a licensed professional counselor and then you as a marriage and family therapist.
So as a licensed professional counselor, and in my particular practice, I work with older children, about 10 and up, including adults. Now there are some other therapists who focus their work on younger children. Often you might want to seek a play therapist who has expertise in that arena. It's not just playing. A lot of people have that misconception. It is a very clinical training and can help families do work together. But I tend to work a lot with individuals and then incorporate family as needed, especially when I work with teenagers. You can't really leave those parents out of the equation, even though those teenagers sometimes want that.
Exactly.
I work a lot on grief issues. That's one of my areas of focus, and so with that I have a wide variety, children and adults who are grieving a variety of different losses. I also have seen a lot of anxiety and depression, and I also work with a lot of life transitions. And so if a family is going through a divorce, has relocated to the area, or thinking about changing schools or careers or any of those things in life that can cause some angst, that tends to be my areas of expertise to kind of help them navigate that transitional time in their lives.
And I think that's so important to offer that service, because I think a lot of times as parents, when we make transitions such as relocating, we don't really think thoroughly about how it's going to impact our children's mental health. We think about their social and academic, but that mental piece, I think it's important to address.
Absolutely. And I think what's important too is to realize, especially during adolescence, that's when some of the diagnosable mental health issues may really start coming to a head, and you might start seeing things that were not as evident as a child. You might have had kind of a difficult child,
Right.
but this might show that somebody is really struggling with more clinical depression, clinical anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. Some of these are going to start really exhibiting more in that adolescent stage of life, and it's be important to have someone that you can consult with about what is going on with my child. Is this normal, or is there some reason to have concern?
Right. And Jennifer, you work with couples.
I do, yeah. I will work with individuals here and there who get referred to me, or I work with lots of other professionals in the community, and so we'll work together. And so I'll see individuals for kind of some depression or anxiety, things that are likely impacting their relationship. But my primary practice is working with couples and trying to help them navigate some of the challenges that come with deciding to pair your life with somebody, which it can be really challenging sometimes. Very, very joyful, but also very challenging. So, and there's lots of things that I see, lots of trends, but it's really try to help people navigate where they're getting stuck in their relationship. Because I don't know about you, but I definitely hear a lot of people saying they get stuck in the same patterns over and over and over again, or they're having the same fight over and over and over again, or perhaps they are fighting about money or kids or time together or what have you on the surface, but there's some underlying stuff that they may not be addressing that's causing a lot of pain in the way that they're interacting. So my job is to really help people get at the place that they're getting really stuck and they're feeling disconnected and they're feeling like they can't turn to each other for support or for care, and that can be really distressing. So I try to help people reconnect that bond, that attachment bond that's so important in a relationship.
When thinking and looking back at the work that you're doing on a daily basis, at what point, because some people may not understand when they need help or that they even need help at all. So how do you go about even coming to that conclusion that I may need some professional advice or some professional guidance?
Yeah. So I loved what Jennifer said earlier about maybe don't wait till it's a crisis and a need that is so evident. I don't think anyone would hurt from counseling.
Right.
Now, I will tell you, if you plan to use insurance, it has to be deemed as medically necessary, which would mean there would have to be a diagnosis associated. But if it is just you want to have a more self-actualized life and really explore some things, there's never a wrong time. I used to tell that to the students that I worked at the different schools. There's never a wrong problem to come to me with. And I find that, you know, waiting does sometimes make it all the more challenging. And just like, you know, Jennifer mentioned, I also see these long patterns of repetitive thinking that is, you know, interrupting healthy life and healthy choices or healthy emotions. And the sooner we can kind of break some of those cycles, the happier that person will experience their life.
Okay, we have less than a minute left in the program. I want you to quickly tell our viewers how they can reach you.
Oh, thank you. So they can call me, 919-448-1707, or check out my website, www.lindow, that's Lindow, counseling.com.
And Jennifer?
And you can see me on the web at www.findingbalancenc.com. You can give me a call at 919-926-8057.
Okay. Definitely important work that you're doing. We thank you both so much for taking the
Oh,
time
thank you
to
very
share that with
much.
us today.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. That's it for this week's Tar Heel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, or send an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next week.